Thank you all for joining. And those of you who didn't get to be here live, we just had some really wonderful introductions with the people who were able to participate live. So thank you for those of you who were able to show up live. And for those of you who weren't, we definitely missed your faces. What we used as kind of our way of connecting and getting a little introduction into each other was our name and where we live and where we're from. But really, and the question I want you to think about as you're watching this is, if you really knew me, you would know that I feel happiest when. And so I just want you to sit with that question on your own time, because you can pause this video now that you're watching the video and just think about, what would it look like for me to be happiest? And so one of the things that I was just mentioning here before I pushed record was that connection is actually one of the key indicators for happiness. And the book by Sean Aker, which is called The Happiness Advantage, has been such an amazing guide for me to understand the research behind the work that I do with compassion and grief. So it's helping me understand some of those points that I'm not a researcher. Everybody has their thing, right? We each have that thing that we contribute to the world. I have this intuitive ability to know certain things, but I don't know why I know them. So then I read books and I'm like, thanks for that research. Thank you. So basically I then compile all the research that backs up everything that I've ever felt or thought. And that is like how I teach and how I do my work. So for those of you who don't know me or don't know me well, and I have my book in here, so this is gonna seem super cheesy, but I wrote a book called The Compassion Code, which is, and the subtitle is How to Say the Right Thing When the Wrong Thing Happens. And the Compassion Code is essentially about how to communicate effectively and kindly with people in our lives, including ourselves, and to have compassion for them and us when we're going through really challenging times. So how to say the right thing when the wrong thing happens. So life is full of things that we aren't expecting. And when I say wrong things, it's not with a judgment. It's more like, hey, I wasn't expecting that, or that sucked really badly and I don't know what to do with that. Right? Like we're going through some really big discomfort as a society right now with COVID and with the social unrest, with so much injustice. So much is happening with the upcoming election. Everything that's going on in the world, it's causing a lot of tension and it's causing a lot of challenges in communication. And so with that comes a disconnection. And therefore, a lot of people are feeling stressed and unhappy. And this being Happiness Month, I felt like it was important for us to talk about why compassion is actually one of the keys for happiness. And happiness is actually one of the keys for success. So I'm going to show you some of my slide. Hold on, let me pull it up. Okay, so compassion is key to success. What? How is that even possible? So I'm going to tell you. So what we used to think is that the sun revolved around the earth. Not so long ago, we thought the sun revolved around the earth. It's kind of like a kid thinks the whole world revolves around them. We thought the sun revolved around us. And then Copernicus discovered that actually we, as the earth, revolved around the sun. And you know, it took over 100 years for people to really believe that that was true, which is insane. That's like more than anybody's lifetime at that point. You know, you maybe have had 1 or 2 people live to 100 then, but like probably not. So that means maybe not even in Copernicus's lifetime did people actually believe him that the earth revolved around the sun. So modern day, okay, the old way is that you do well in school and you get a job, okay? And then you get married and you have a family, and then you work hard and you sacrifice, and you're successful. And success leads to happiness. And the problem with that is that we look around the world and we see a lot of really unhappy, successful people. So I love putting success into quotes, because if you're successful, what does that even mean first? And then if I'm unhappy and I'm technically successful, then the question that ends up being asked is, what's wrong with me? Why am I not happy? I have everything. I have the job. I did well in school. I got married. I checked all the boxes. I got a family. I even had kids. worked hard, I've sacrificed, I'm successful, I'm rich, I have 3 houses and 2 yachts, and fill in the blank, all the other things that you thought meant success. And you're not happy. And what that does is it puts us in conflict with ourselves and what we think and our belief system. So grief, as we define it in the grief recovery world, is the conflicting feelings that come at the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. Okay, I thought I was gonna check all the boxes and then I would arrive at happiness. What's wrong with me? And that is conflicting feelings. I'm not happy, but I have all the things I thought I wanted. When I lose 10 pounds, when I make an A on this test, when I get my license, when I do this, I'm gonna be happy. So what happens when we get there? We actually achieve what we want. Why aren't we happy? Okay, so the new way, the Laura Jack way. Compassion. Compassion for ourselves and for each other. And what compassion means is to relate kindly to ourselves and to other people. And when I say relate kindly, that means we speak nicely to ourselves. Do you know that you talk more to yourself inside your own head than you do to any other human being in your entire life? And a lot of I won't even ask for a show of hands because I know the answer already, but how many of us have a mean girl or a bully inside of our head saying, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you do that right? Even those of us who are on the personal growth path, you still have to combat those voices that you learned as a child within yourself to be like, why didn't I do that right? Why am I not achieving enough? We're on this old trajectory, right? So compassion starts with being kind to ourselves, having that kindness, having that gentleness, forgiving ourselves when we mess up, apologizing when we mess up to others, right? Then we communicate those things to ourselves, to other people. And that communication, when it's compassionate, leads to connection. Connection, like I mentioned before, is one of the key indicators for happiness. So compassion, which a lot of times is vulnerable, right? Brené Brown talks a lot about vulnerability as a means to connection. Compassion is the key to vulnerability because if we aren't compassionate, it is really scary to be vulnerable. So if we're not kind to ourselves, I say to you, I'm like, Emily, I love this event so much. And God, I feel so honored to be out here. And you are like, oh, okay, yeah, it was nice to have you too, but like really not sure. I would probably inside my head be like, oh no, what's wrong with me? Like self-critical. But the compassionate way is like, oh, instead of what's wrong with me, it's, I hope Emily's doing okay. That wasn't her typical response. Because what we typically do is if somebody looks at us a funny way or honks at us or swerves in front of us in the car or cuts us off at the shopping cart or whatever, we immediately jump to the conclusion that they're mad at us. When most of the time, it has next to nothing to do with us and it has a lot to do with them. So the self-compassionate response is, I hope that person's doing okay. Wonder what's going on with their day, because most likely something is going on with them. It's not about us at all. And so then we're able to communicate with compassion because we didn't take it personally. Because I wasn't like, gosh, Emily's so rude. I'm like, oh, I wonder what's up with Emily. So then after class, I'm like, hey, Emily, is everything going okay? I just noticed like this face that you made didn't feel like normal Emily. And she'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe you noticed that. Earlier today, I was just having a really tough time and I wasn't really sure if I was going to get there in time. I was feeling really stressed out, right? So all this stuff, I made up this story. Emily hates me. She thinks I'm stupid and she wishes I weren't here. Wasn't even close to true. She was in her own world, doing her own thing, having her own hard time, right? Which allows us then, when we have that self-compassion, when we don't take things personally, when we don't make up some story that people hate us because we hate ourselves, then we're able to communicate effectively and kindly, which allows us to connect deeply, intimately, which, as I already mentioned to those of you who are here live, my favorite thing in the world, this deep connection, because it makes me so happy when I get to connect deeply, authentically, full of love and compassion with people. And guess what happens when you're happy? success. Success is what happens when you are happy. Because when we're happy, and I'm curious to hear your feedback on how this resonates or lands for you, but when you're happy, you are alive. You are energetic. You are a magnet to other people, because people are like, remember that Meg Ryan scene in When Harry Met Sally, when she's like having her little momentary excitement in the restaurant and somebody says, I'll have what she's having. That's how people feel when they see your happiness. Sometimes they're turned off by it because they're so deep in the darkness of their own soul that they can't even deal with the reflection of your brightness, right? But that, again, it's not about you, right? So when we are genuinely happy, we can move mountains. We can create anything we want. The creativity that comes from that, the confidence, it all comes from the fact that we're happy. And that allows us to be successful. And then we get to redefine what success means. Like for me, success is about having flexibility, freedom, connection, time with my family, impact in the world, right? So like for me, it's understanding what my own core values are and then working towards those on a daily basis. Hey, today, have I had any connection? Have I moved my body at all? Moving my body for me is a huge part of my happiness, right? I love moving. Have I told anybody how much I appreciate them today? Because that also makes me happy.